As many? Mitchell. The chair recognizes Senator Mitchell.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Vice President. After all this comity here today, I'm not quite sure where to start, except to say that I thought that the speakers from my side summarized quite adequately what the party's position is. And from the looks of it, they were doing quite a lot of homework overnight, because it seems as if they've read the bills quite thoroughly. They told me some things that I didn't know until they said them. But I mean, in all seriousness, they adequately presented the position of the side. And so we will be voting with those caveats which we expressed to support the position with regard to this to these three pieces, these three statutes in the making. I would therefore concentrate not on the rationale which has been advanced for passing these bills, which is obvious on the face of it, and all the dangers which fall therein, but to point out that there is a need, I think, in this society now, and it's strange to me that, you know, Charles Fox had a consumer association, or whatever you wanted to call it, 40, 50 years ago, and there's no voice. I heard what the senator said about labor. There's supposedly a representative for civil society here as well. I call them a freedom fighter, champion. Yeah, I say it. Yeah. Freedom fighter. And what I'm trying to do to reconcile in my mind is, how could a freedom fighter say that he comes gladly to this table to pass this legislation? You're supposed to come kicking and screaming.
I thought he did a pretty good job of kicking against the bills.
No, well, you know, well, I can come to that, right? I also want to say this, that if you believe in freedom of speech, man, just speak freely. You don't have to give a disclaimer. You know, just say, this is my view. I said that to someone else before. You know, you come here, just speak. They can't do you nothing. Not a thing. Not a thing. But I do want to call attention to the conventions of the Constitution, and I had occasion to call one of the members of your government when I saw a headline in the newspaper where a conversation was being had with the Prime Minister on the front pages of the newspaper. So I called the individual up and I said, well, look here, you mean it's gotten to the point where you have to talk to the Prime Minister in public? I mean, the conventions are quite obvious that if you have to talk to the Prime Minister in public, you don't belong around the table with the Prime Minister. Because presumably, you can have a conversation with the Prime Minister and say, I disagree with policy. But if the Prime Minister says the policy is X, then that's the policy. You can't get up and say, you should appoint this one because I don't know what you're taking your time, and so on and so forth. You can't tell the Prime Minister that in public. You gotta, if he's your colleague, you sit around the table. So, I said, around this table, that I'm not getting in your business, but, you know, if you're the party whip, how could you be attacking government policy around the table? How? The party whip's supposed to fall in line with the policy. And if you have a conversation, we don't need to hear that conversation. That conversation has to be had around the table. I can have my cake and eat it too. I can have my cake and eat it too. I don't know. I don't know what's, you know, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. That's all. No, I'm speaking to the bill. These things were raised. These things were raised during the debate. These things were raised during the debate. The other point I would make, of a kind of generic point. Be careful how you do not accept that in this era we are in danger of criminalizing something which has normally been normal behavior. I'll say it again. There is a danger in passing legislation in this era of criminalizing what people would consider to be legitimate conduct. Now, I'll tell you an example. And this comes to the consumer point I was seeking to make. Before, the Attorney General said it was $10,000, that was the threshold. So you went to the bank, you took your check for $10,000 or $9,999, you put it in the bank. The other day, a friend calls up and says that he goes to a bank with 2 checks for $4,000. And when he tries to put them in the account, the bank tells him, sorry, you can't deposit more than $3,000 on any single day. So we can put $2,000 in here and you come back tomorrow to put the rest of the money in. Well, where do they make these rules up? Without notice. Where does this come from? And this is only part and parcel of what is being done to consumers in the Bahamas in the name of protecting us from all these things, this legislation that we're passing. That's the issue. People spoke about it in various ways here today by saying, you know, risk assessment, this, that, and so on and so forth. The other point, and I want to come back to this, the other point is, let us not forget that privacy is an important value. I mean, we keep rushing headlong into doing all of these things, but forgetting that privacy is still an important value. There are good and just reasons why you don't want people to know your business. And it got nothing to do with criminality. You know, particularly in a small society. I mean, Lord help you, you know. And confidentiality is the other part of it. So we have to be careful. And that's all I can say at this point when we do this. We have to be careful not to forget that these are important values. And what I was getting to say about the need for a consumer association or something, because I can tell you, if you did a survey of the banking sector in this country, and I'm talking about the domestic sector. The other day I had occasion to call the central bank because I saw some alarming headline about banks boasting about the fact that they don't accept cash in the bank. So I was confused about this, but it turns out they're talking about the offshore sector and accepting large amounts of cash in the bank. But you would almost think it applies to us because the atmosphere about cash in the bank today is so hostile, and this is what I mean by be careful about criminalizing legitimate behavior. You go walking into the bank with your normal cash money, and you feel like a criminal. Yes, right. You feel like a criminal. And cross-examined where you got this, so on and so forth. I mean, they've known you. The other day, someone was writing to the newspaper. Says, they've known me for 40 years. I bank every day in the bank. Suddenly, I go to make a deposit on my mortgage, and the bank says, I'm not accepting your check today. So the person asked me the question, well, if they don't, because somehow they didn't fill out the Know Your Customer forms. So you don't fill out the forms, and this legislation allows you to do that. If you don't fill out the Know Your Customer forms, They can shut the bank account. They apparently now can refuse to accept your mortgage payment. So, of course, the legal question asked me is, when you refuse to take my mortgage payment, does that extinguish my debt to you? Does it? I mean, you know. Well, exactly. That's my point. It's so foolish on the face of it. I give you my good money that I earn my money, I work hard for, to pay this mortgage off, which is another form of slavery. God help me. If I ever get to be 21 again, I'll never borrow a dime from a bank. Never. Never. I mean, it really is absolute slavery. Absolute slavery. No. Now, one of the questions I wanted to ask, though, the regime of this is supposed to also apply to friendly societies. Now, that one sort of, you know, perked my ears up a bit, because I was thinking to myself, and perhaps the Attorney General, on summarizing this, can say, if insurers are out, why aren't friendly societies out? So they get a buy on general insurance. But I'm just thinking to myself now, I'm a member of two, I gotta confess, I suppose, or disclose my interest. I'm a member of two. The Elks, the Masons. So you're telling me now that the Elks and the Masons now have to have compliance officers? And you're telling me now that they're subject to know your right, is that what you're saying? Because, I mean, if that is the case, I mean, we're really going from the sublime, sublime to the ridiculous. No, but I think that must be made clear. Because you're saying that this regime is being, you said in your presentation that the regime is now being applied for the first time, not only to financial institutions, but also to these other bodies. I want to also say that the other issue on discrimination that I think is offensive to me, and I want to speak strongly to. In fact, I wish I had the funding to challenge this in law on the basis of discrimination. I don't see why this category of politically exposed persons, so broadly defined, should make a distinction between how a bank and financial institution treats me and how it treats any other citizen. I do not see it. It is simply outrageous. Outrageous. And then to go so far as to say, as it's so broadly defined, the senator here was talking about it, your business partners, your wife, your family members, my brother, all have to sign on to this. You know, it just seems an act of discrimination. To the point where, and I'll use not a local example, but the former foreign minister, now Chancellor of the Exchequer, when he was in Nassau, was telling me that the daughter, 12-year-old daughter of Cameron, who's former prime minister, couldn't open a bank account in the UK because she was the daughter of the prime minister, who was a politically exposed person. Ludicrous. It can't be that this is what this is meant to do. And I also join in supporting the position that you must be able to go into a bank and open a bank account in less than 2 days, 3 days. And you must also be able to get these folk, again, on my consumer point, to get these folk to answer the telephone. You can't get anybody on the telephone in a bank to respond to you. They're getting more efficient. The other day I had to stop myself from saying a 4-letter word on the phone because I'm trying to get what? Sugar honey iced tea. Right. Yeah. But there I am trying to get a local manager at a local bank. So I open the telephone directory and I dial the local number. The answer comes back, sounded very similar to what happens when you lose a credit card or something. I didn't think anything of it. So, person comes on the phone, and then asks me my name, still didn't catch it, and then asked me what was the call in connection with. Now, usually in this country, if I just say my name, the person says, okay, right? So, if it, you know, if the person comes back and says, what are you calling so-and-so for, right? So I said, hang on, lady, where are you, right? She says, this is the call center in Kingston, Jamaica. I said, really? So I said, so you mean I'm calling Kingston, Jamaica to get a fellow who I want to see down in Thompson Boulevard? She says, yes. Could you tell me what it is you call? I said, look, lady, I'm not going through that. I may as well just walk down the road to go see him. You know, I didn't try that because they may have a barrier to stop you from doing that too. You know, but I tried the old-fashioned snail mail after a while. But the more serious point, and I'm using this as an occasion to raise this point, there is coming, I believe, and I'll help to lead it, actually, a revolt amongst consumers on the way banks are doing business in the Bahamas. It is really reprehensible. I can think of no other word for it. It is reprehensible. They have no regard, no respect for the people who are their customers. None whatsoever. With utter disrespect. Don't answer the phone, don't respond to correspondence, you miss a payment, your house is gone. And they sit down, and the thing is, they never lose. They never lose. Even when they're negotiating with you, the interest is still adding up. And I thought it was morally wrong of them. During the time when the country was in that trough post-2008, I wrote a bank, because some people were about to lose their homes in the Fox Hill constituency, lose their home. They had been struggling making these periodic payments, and you know, of course, they always have this little paragraph in the mortgage that says, now, no matter how we waive this and so on, unless we do this in writing, you know, nothing changes, right? So you can go pecking away, giving you a little $300 here, $200 as fast as you can get it, to make, you know, you think you're keeping yourself in your home. And they come along one day with a bailiff and so on and so forth, and out you are. So I wrote them, I wrote the head of the bank, and I said, well, let me ask you this. Given the home market, and this is especially the case in Grand Bahama, given the way the market is for the sale of property, why would you not make an arrangement at a level which would allow the person to stay in the home, maintain the home and its value until such time as the market recovers? You know, oh no, we can't do that. So out the person goes, this home in Fox Hill, and I can pass the house today, and grass is grown up around it, all the glass in the house is broken out. I mean, I just don't understand the moral responsibility that a bank feels in that position. You know, I mean, it just seems to me something completely off and unethical about that. And to finish the story about the call of trying to get the fellow down the road, I said to myself, you know, I know the head of the bank in Nassau. So let me call him and complain about this. But then I said, stop, let me not waste my time. What's the point of calling him? Because he can't do anything about it either. I don't know who can do anything about it. But you just have a feeling in this system that we have where we're imposing all these rules, doing it gladly, and saying we're trying to save the sector and all the rest of it, that nobody is in actual control of this. I mean, the dear senator talking about sovereignty. Well, Minister, I'm just saying to you, we must do something about service in the banking sector in the Bahamas. Must do something. You know, I don't know who has to talk to them or say something, or maybe, I don't know, a consumer revolt of some kind has to come, but it is actually ridiculous. I think I've made that point here today as strongly as I can. And I join my colleagues in saying what they've said in terms of the support. But I hope in this presentation today that what you remember is the tales of horror of dealing with the domestic banking sector, which we must do our best to change, to improve for the benefit of these laborers that the senator was talking about, the working people who have to put up with this hassle every time they want to go and do banking in a country. They keep talking about a cashless society. This is rubbish. A cashless society, because what you're doing here is that when you change from electronic, you're taking away an individual's right to act, so they can track everything that you do when you change to electronic. And I read somewhere in the Wall Street Journal that one thing cash doesn't do, when you put it under your mattress, it doesn't ask you to fill out an 18-page form to do so. It doesn't ask you when you're putting your cash under a mattress or in the rock hole.
It doesn't say the box is yours now?
Right.
Oh, you own it.
It's yours. You do with it what you like. But there's a balancing act, and I think it's the government's responsibility to get on top of the regulation of this sector and make them respond. They have a moral and ethical obligation to respond because they are essential to commerce. Banking is a public good. Even though it's run by private companies, it's a public good, and they get those licenses and they have to act in a public fashion in the public interest. And you know, the problem is many of us are too scared because we owe them so much money. They figure they can pull the plug. Well, you know, I got nothing, so happy, glad, you know, whatever. The fact is, we need to do something to improve it, and I want to leave that message today. I think I've made the point and won't beat it anymore. Thank you very much.